2 weeks ago, I uncovered that my girlfriend of 3 years had been using a fictional book club as an excuse to sleep with my best friend every Thursday night for the past 6 months. The worst part wasn't just the affair, it was discovering their text messages where they mocked how easily I believed her elaborate stories about literary discussions and wine tastings. I trusted these two people more than anyone else in my life, and they turned my faith in them into their private joke. I'm 31M, and my now ex-girlfriend Emma is 28F. We met through work and have been living together for about 18 months. Emma works in marketing and has always been an intellectual person who loves literature, art, and deep conversations about culture. My best friend Ryan is 32M, and we've known each other since our freshman year of college. Over 10 years of friendship. Ryan and Emma had met plenty of times at parties, dinners, and group activities, but they always seemed to have a polite but distant relationship. Emma thought Ryan was too immature and party-focused, while Ryan found Emma a bit pretentious and overly serious. At least, that's what I thought based on their interactions when we were all together. About 8 months ago, Emma started talking about wanting to join some kind of intellectual social group. She said she missed the academic discussions she'd had in college and wanted to find like-minded people to talk about books and ideas with. Emma had always been a voracious reader, so this seemed like a natural interest for her. 2 months later, Emma excitedly told me that some women from her yoga studio had started a book club and invited her to join. She said they met every Thursday evening to discuss literary fiction, memoirs, and occasionally poetry. The group apparently rotated hosting duties between members' homes and always included wine and interesting food. I was thrilled for Emma because she'd been feeling somewhat isolated since we'd moved in together. She'd mentioned missing the intellectual stimulation of her graduate school friend group, and this book club seemed perfect for her personality and interests. From the very first meeting, Emma came home energized and excited about the discussions they'd had. She'd tell me detailed stories about the book they'd analyzed, the different perspectives each member had brought to the conversation, and the sophisticated snacks the host had prepared. Emma would describe the other members in vivid detail. There was Patricia, a retired literature professor who brought academic insights to every discussion. Maya, a freelance journalist who always had interesting historical context. And Jennifer, a museum curator who connected books to visual art movements. I loved hearing Emma's recaps of these meetings because she seemed so intellectually fulfilled and socially energized. She'd often recommend books to me based on their discussions, and we'd have our own conversations about themes and characters from the novels she was reading with the group. Around the same time that Emma joined the book club, Ryan went through a difficult breakup with his longtime girlfriend Kate. Ryan was pretty torn up about it and started hanging around our apartment more frequently, usually showing up on weekend evenings looking for company and distraction. Emma was surprisingly compassionate toward Ryan during this period. She'd cook extra food when she knew he was coming over and would engage him in conversations about his feelings and his plans for moving forward. I was impressed by Emma's kindness because she'd previously seemed somewhat dismissive of Ryan's more emotional tendencies. About 3 months after Emma joined the book club, their meetings started becoming more ambitious with their selections. Instead of popular literary fiction, they were tackling challenging philosophical works, experimental novels, and dense historical texts. Emma seemed to relish these more difficult books and would spend extra time preparing for meetings by researching authors and themes. The group also started extending their meetings to include dinner before their discussions. Emma would leave earlier on Thursdays, around 5 p.m. instead of 7 p.m., and would come home later, usually around 11 p.m. or midnight. She'd describe elaborate meals the host had prepared and how the food had somehow connected to the themes of whatever book they were discussing. For months after Emma joined the book club, I noticed that Ryan seemed to be recovering well from his breakup. He was less moody when he came over and mentioned that he'd started dating again. But he also became less available for our usual activities, skipping our weekly basketball games and declining invitations to hang out on weekends. When I asked Ryan about his new dating life, he was evasive and would change the subject quickly. I figured he was probably seeing someone casually and wasn't ready to introduce her to our friend group yet. Around this time, Emma started dressing more carefully for her Thursday book club meetings. She'd spend extra time on her hair and makeup and would wear outfits that seemed a bit fancy for sitting around someone's living room discussing literature. When I commented on how nice she looked, Emma said that the group had started going to upscale wine bars after their book discussions, and she wanted to look appropriate for those venues. She'd come home with stories about sophisticated cocktails and interesting conversations they'd continued about the books in these elegant settings. 3 months ago, Emma's enthusiasm for book club reached new heights. She started reading voraciously throughout the week, often staying up late to finish books before Thursday meetings. She'd take notes while reading and would discuss themes and characters with me as she prepared for the group discussions. Emma also started buying new books constantly, saying that the group had decided to read multiple titles each month to deepen their analysis. Our apartment filled up with literary fiction, philosophy books, and collections of essays that Emma was supposedly discussing with her intellectual companions. 2 months ago, Emma came home from book club later than usual, around 1:30 a.m. She apologized and explained that they'd gotten into such a fascinating discussion about Circe by Madeline Miller that they'd completely lost track of time. She seemed slightly disheveled, but was glowing with excitement about the insights the group had shared. I was actually inspired by Emma's description of their Circe discussion and bought the book myself the next day. When I read it, I was impressed by how thoughtfully Emma had described the themes and characters. It seemed like her book club was having genuinely sophisticated literary conversations. 6 weeks ago, I happened to run into Patricia at a coffee shop downtown. Emma had described Patricia as a retired literature professor who was one of the founding members of the book club, so I was excited to meet one of Emma's intellectual companions. When I introduced myself as Emma's boyfriend and mentioned how much she enjoyed their Thursday evening book discussions, Patricia looked completely confused. She said she had no idea what I was talking about and that she didn't know Emma well enough to be in a book club with her. I tried to clarify by mentioning some of the books Emma had said they discussed together, but Patricia maintained that she'd never been part of any book club and rarely spoke to Emma beyond casual greetings at the yoga studio. I left that conversation feeling puzzled, but tried to rationalize what had happened. Maybe Patricia had memory issues, or maybe Emma had gotten confused about which member was which when she told me stories about the group. When I mentioned running into Patricia to Emma that evening, she seemed momentarily startled, but quickly explained that Patricia had actually dropped out of the book club after just a few meetings because she found the pace too demanding. Emma said Patricia probably didn't remember being part of the group since her participation had been so brief. This explanation seemed plausible, so I didn't dwell on the inconsistency. But I did start paying slightly more attention to Emma's book club stories to see if there were other details that didn't quite add up. A month ago, Emma mentioned that her book club was reading The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I've been wanting to read that book anyway, so I bought a copy and started reading it so Emma and I could discuss it together. When I told Emma I was reading The Vanishing Half, she seemed nervous and said that the group had actually decided to switch to a different book at the last minute. She claimed they'd chosen something more obscure because several members had already read The Vanishing Half and wanted to explore new territory. This felt like an odd coincidence, but I didn't want to seem controlling by questioning Emma's book club activities too closely. Last Thursday evening, Emma left for book club at her usual time, around 5 p.m. She was dressed beautifully and carrying a notebook where she'd written discussion questions about whatever book they were supposedly reading that week. Around 7 p.m., I realized I'd forgotten to return a power drill I'd borrowed from Ryan the previous weekend. Since I was planning to do some home improvement projects that weekend, I decided to drive over to Ryan's apartment to return the drill and pick up some other tools he'd offered to lend me. When I pulled into Ryan's apartment complex, I immediately noticed Emma's distinctive blue Honda Civic parked in the visitor parking area. My first reaction was confusion rather than suspicion. Maybe there was an emergency, or maybe the book club was meeting somewhere near Ryan's apartment and Emma had parked there for convenience. But as I sat in my car, staring at Emma's car, I couldn't think of any logical reason why she'd be at Ryan's place when she was supposed to be discussing literature with her intellectual female companions. I decided to text Ryan to let him know I was outside and wanted to return his drill. Ryan didn't respond immediately, which was unusual since he's normally very quick to reply to messages. After waiting about 15 minutes, I decided to go up to Ryan's apartment and knock on the door. If there was an innocent explanation for Emma's presence, I'd find out quickly. When Ryan answered the door, he was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt and looked shocked to see me. Behind him, I could hear what sounded like someone moving around quietly, as if trying not to be detected. Ryan claimed he'd been napping and hadn't heard his phone, but he looked wide awake and extremely nervous. When I asked about returning the drill, he said he'd find it later and bring it to me over the weekend. I tried to peer past Ryan into his apartment, but he was deliberately blocking my view and seemed determined to keep our conversation short and send me away. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, I left and went back to my car. But instead of driving home, I parked across the street where I could watch Ryan's building. At 11:15 p.m., I saw Emma emerge from Ryan's apartment building. She was carrying her purse and the light jacket she'd been wearing when she left for book club. She walked to her car without noticing me sitting across the street. Emma drove away, presumably heading home to tell me about her evening of literary discussion and wine bar conversations. I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd witnessed. There was no innocent explanation for Emma spending 4 hours at Ryan's apartment while claiming to be at book club. When Emma arrived home around 11:45 p.m., she was in her typical post-book club mood, relaxed, happy, and eager to share stories about her evening. She kissed me hello and started describing their discussion of Clara and the sun and the innovative tapas they tried at a new Spanish restaurant afterward. As Emma talked about her fictional evening, I realized she was giving me a completely fabricated account of how she'd spent the past 6 hours. She described conversations with book club members, analyzed themes from the novel, and provided details about the restaurant's atmosphere and menu. I didn't confront Emma that night because I was too shocked to know how to handle the situation. I needed time to think about what I discovered and decide how to proceed. Over the weekend, I started re-examining Emma's behavior patterns over the past 6 months with this new information. All those Thursday evenings when she'd come home intellectually stimulated and socially fulfilled suddenly took on a completely different meaning. I began to suspect that Emma and Ryan had been having an affair for months, using the book club as an elaborate cover story for their weekly meetings. On Monday morning, I decided to confront Ryan first because I wanted to understand the full scope of their relationship before talking to Emma. I called Ryan and asked if he wanted to grab lunch. When we sat down at a restaurant, I told him directly that I knew something was going on between him and Emma and that I'd seen her leaving his apartment on Thursday night. Ryan initially tried to deny everything and claimed that Emma had just stopped by briefly to drop something off for me. But when I pressed him for details and pointed out the timeline inconsistencies, he eventually broke down and admitted to the affair. According to Ryan, he and Emma had started talking more frequently after his breakup with Kate. What had begun as Emma offering emotional support had gradually become more intimate, and they'd started hooking up about 6 months ago. Ryan said they never intended for it to become an ongoing affair, but that they developed genuine feelings for each other and hadn't known how to end it without destroying my relationships with both of them. The book club story had been Emma's creation to explain her weekly absences. Ryan said they'd spent their Thursday evenings together cooking dinner, talking, and having sex in his apartment. But the most devastating part of Ryan's confession was when he showed me some of their text message conversations. Not only had they been having an affair, but they'd been regularly mocking me for believing Emma's elaborate book club stories. In their text exchanges, Emma and Ryan shared jokes about how gullible I was and how easily I accepted Emma's fictional accounts of literary discussions. They seemed to find my trust amusing rather than heartbreaking. One particularly painful message showed Emma telling Ryan about how I'd bought The Vanishing Half to read along with her book club and how she'd had to quickly invent a story about them switching books. Ryan had responded with laughing emojis and a comment about how I fell for everything. Another exchange showed them mocking the detailed notes Emma would write to make her book club story more believable, with Ryan joking that she was putting more effort into lying to me than most people put into actual book clubs. Reading those messages felt like being kicked in the stomach. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd been actively laughing at my expense for months. Ryan apologized extensively and claimed that he'd felt guilty about deceiving me, but hadn't known how to end the affair without causing massive damage to our friendship and my relationship with Emma. I told Ryan that our friendship was over and that I never wanted to see him again. I also told him that I was going to confront Emma and that he should prepare for our entire friend group to learn about their betrayal. That evening, I confronted Emma when she returned from work. I told her that I knew about her affair with Ryan and that I'd seen her leaving his apartment on Thursday night. I also told her that Ryan had confessed everything and shown me their text messages mocking me. Emma's reaction was immediate panic and desperate apologies. She started crying and saying that she'd never meant to hurt me and that she wanted to save our relationship. But when I asked for specific details about how long the affair had been going on, Emma continued lying and tried to minimize the timeline. She claimed it had only been happening for a few weeks and that it was just physical attraction without emotional attachment. When I told Emma that Ryan had already confessed to the 6-month timeline and shown me their mocking text messages, she finally admitted to the full scope of their betrayal. Emma confessed that she'd been seeing Ryan every Thursday for 6 months and that the book club had been entirely fictional. She admitted that they'd been texting constantly and that yes, they had made jokes about how easily I believed her stories. When I asked Emma if she had feelings for Ryan, she hesitated before saying that she cared about him, but that she loved me more and wanted to work on our relationship. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just a physical affair. Emma had developed real feelings for Ryan while systematically lying to me for half a year. I told Emma that our relationship was over and that I wanted her to move out of our apartment immediately. Update: 1 week later, Emma packed her things and moved out over the weekend. She's staying with a co-worker while she looks for her own apartment. The end of our relationship has been emotionally devastating, but I'm also experiencing relief at no longer living with someone who's been deceiving me so elaborately for months. Emma has been calling and texting constantly, begging for a chance to explain herself and asking if we can work toward reconciliation. She claims that her affair with Ryan is completely over and that she wants to focus on rebuilding trust with me. But I can't get past the calculated nature of their deception. It wasn't just infidelity. It was months of elaborate storytelling designed to hide their affair, combined with their amusement and my willingness to believe Emma's lies. I've started telling our mutual friends what happened, and most people have been supportive and understanding. A few people think I should consider giving Emma another chance since she seems genuinely remorseful about her choices. Ryan has been trying to reach out through mutual friends, but I've made it clear that I don't want any contact with him. 10 years of friendship is over, and I can't imagine any scenario where I'd be able to trust him again. Update 3 weeks later. I discovered this week that Emma and Ryan are now in an open relationship. According to mutual friends, they started spending time together publicly almost immediately after I confronted them about their affair. They're no longer hiding their relationship and seem to be treating it as a legitimate new romance rather than acknowledging its origins as a betrayal. Learning that they've moved on so quickly has been painful, but it's also confirmed that I made the right decision in ending both relationships immediately. If Emma had been genuinely sorry about the affair and committed to repairing our relationship, she wouldn't have immediately started dating Ryan openly. The fact that they're now together publicly proves that their affair was always more than just a mistake. It was a real relationship they were planning to pursue regardless of how it affected me. Most of our mutual friends have expressed shock at how quickly Emma and Ryan transitioned from secret affair to public relationship. People are starting to understand that their betrayal was more serious and premeditated than either of them initially claimed. I've been focusing on rebuilding my social life and emotional health without them. I started seeing a therapist to work through the trust issues and betrayal, and I've been spending more time with friends who weren't connected to Emma or Ryan. Update 2 months later. My emotional recovery has been progressing well, and I've started dating someone new. Emma and Ryan are apparently still together and seem to be in a committed relationship. I heard through friends that they moved in together last month, which confirms that their connection was much deeper and more serious than either of them admitted when I discovered their affair. I've had no direct contact with either Emma or Ryan since our confrontations, and I intend to keep it that way. Some mutual friends have mentioned that both Emma and Ryan have expressed regret about how they handled the situation, but neither has attempted to apologize to me directly. Looking back, I can see red flags that I missed during their 6-month affair. Ryan's decreased availability for our usual activities coincided with Emma joining her book club, and Emma's changed mood patterns and increased attention to her Thursday evening appearance now seem obvious in retrospect. I think I ignored these signs because I trusted both of them completely and couldn't imagine that they would be capable of such systematic and long-term deception. Update 6 months later. It's been 6 months since I discovered the affair, and I'm in a much healthier emotional state. I'm in a new relationship with someone who values honesty and direct communication, and I've learned to pay closer attention to my instincts when something feels inconsistent in my relationships. Emma and Ryan broke up about 6 weeks ago, according to mutual friends. Apparently, their relationship didn't survive the transition from secret affair to normal dating once the excitement of deception and forbidden romance was removed. I heard that Emma has been asking mutual friends if I might be open to some kind of conversation or closure meeting, but I'm not interested in any contact with her. The trust has been irreparably damaged, and I've moved forward with my life. Final update, 1 year later. It's been a full year since I discovered that Emma's book club was actually cover for her affair with Ryan, and I can honestly say I'm grateful that I found out when I did. Discovering their betrayal was devastating at the time, but it also revealed their true characters and saved me from potentially years more of elaborate deception and mockery. I'm now in a healthy, honest relationship and have surrounded myself with friends who demonstrate integrity and loyalty rather than just convenience and entertainment. Both Emma and Ryan have attempted to reconnect with me through mutual friends several times over the past year, but I've maintained complete no contact with both of them. I have no interest in having people in my life who are capable of such calculated and sustained deception. The experience taught me to trust my instincts when details don't add up, and to value people who respect my trust rather than those who find it amusing or exploitable. I also learned that betrayal often involves elaborate fiction rather than simple mistakes. Emma and Ryan didn't just have an affair. They created an entire alternate reality to hide their relationship and found my faith in them entertaining rather than precious. The moral of the story: when your partner's new hobby makes them happier than spending time with you, And when their stories about it are overly detailed or change under questioning, trust your instincts and investigate further. Also, real friends and partners don't mock you behind your back for trusting them. People who genuinely care about you will treasure your trust rather than finding it amusing or convenient for their deceptions. And finally, the most devastating betrayals often come from the people you trust most, but surviving them can lead to stronger boundaries and more authentic relationships in the future.